Okay, we'll go ahead and call the Los Osos Groundwater Basin Management Committee Wednesday, September 21, 2022 meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please? You'll have to do Daniel's work. I think it'd be easier than Daniel doing it remotely.
I think Daniel was planning on still running the meeting.
Okay.
He's right up there.
Yeah, and Marshall, we may want to reorder the agenda a little bit. As you can see, one of the items is item 9A, a change in the director representation for S&T Mutual Water Company. And it might be just beneficial to do that up front. And then S&T's new representative can then participate in the rest of the meeting.
Not here.
Let's go ahead and get the
Yeah,
roll call.
let's get the roll call first, Daniel.
Okay, we can do that. Director Cody, Director Cody.
Started out on the wrong leg already.
Yeah. Director Gibson.
Here.
Director Zimmer.
Here.
Chair Ohilsky.
Present. Okay, so we'll move to, we'll push that item up, but we'll get the original stuff done. So let's do the Pledge of Allegiance first, please. Mr. Gibson, will you lead us, please?
You would please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let's just go to board member comments and then we'll go to that item that Daniel suggested we move up. Does any board member have some comments that are not on an item before us?
Nope, just looking forward to item 9A.
Emphasized it, yes. All right, do you have anything?
No.
All right, so we don't have any special presentation number 5, so let's move up number 9A to this location. We'll leave 9B and see where they are, but so 9A is the S&T Mutual Water Company Basin Management Committee Director change. The recommendation is to receive a letter from S&T Mutual Water Company regarding the change in the BMC director and alternate director positions. So with that, I'll send it over to you, Daniel.
Yeah, so the Base Management Committee staff received this letter from S&T Mutual on September 2nd. And in accordance with the BMC rules and regulations, they've notified the BMC that they'd like to make a change in their director representation. At Charlie's request, he wishes to retire from his current position as S&T director on the BMC. And the S&T Mutual Company would like to announce Beth Reinecke as the director, and then Chris Gardner as the alternate director representing S&T at the Basin Management Committee. Charlie, thankfully, will still stay on in a role representing BMC as S&T staff representative, coordinating with the other staff from the other BMC parties. And so I'd like to just thank Charlie for all his contributions to the BMC. He's definitely been a very welcome addition to the BMC and has contributed in a number of different ways towards advancing key Basin Management Committee initiatives. But with that, I'd also like to welcome Beth to the Basin Management Committee.
Come on up.
Okay, so, you want to get your microphone up there for me? You're going to have to say a few introductory words so everybody knows.
It's just a tradition. Yeah. Now you can. No, there's a little button right there. You'll see a red light there.
Okay.
I'd
Can you
just
guys
like
hear
you to
me?
Give us a brief overview so people know your background. I talked to Charlie extensively, so I know everything.
Okay, sure. My name is Beth Reinecke, and I'm here on behalf of S&T. I actually have worked quite a lot with Mark Zimmer with Golden State Water Company, so I have background in water. Going back farther, my background is also in the military. I'm with the Air National Guard still currently, and I do bioenvironmental engineering in that part of my life. So I have kind of a broad over the water world. I do stormwater, I do water quality, I do regulations, compliance, all that kind of stuff. So, and currently I'm doing a lot of grant writing as it actually happens to be. So anyways, thank you for the welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Beth.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, then with that, you're welcomed. And now we'll move on to item.
Just one
I
thing.
have a director comment.
Well, on this one, we're not closing this one yet, right? I just wanted. So one of the things though with S&T, Beth, I don't know if you know the background, like Charlie was holding many hats for S&T, right? And so the participation at the staff level and then at the board level kind of gave some grace into that. But what I think I just heard Dan mention is that Charlie's going to stay on board as the staff representative. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, good, because he has the background and a lot of
Mhm.
information. So I think that'll be helpful because that, you know, when the staff meets and talks about some of this stuff and prepares these reports.
Okay.
Charlie was attending both of those, so.
Right. Okay. And actually, just so everyone knows, I was on staff before, so I have been working with BMC.
Okay.
Yeah, doing some stuff, kind of beside Chris Gardner, but so I do have some experience here, probably since like maybe March. So
All right, well, welcome aboard.
thank you, Mark.
Okay, I think you're welcomed now. All right, with that, then we'll go ahead and move to the consent agenda. Does any, I guess I'll take public comment on that last item, so.
No swearing in.
No. She can swear if she wants
No
to.
swearing in, no swearing out. No swearing.
If you'd like to make a comment online, please raise your hand or come up to the podium in person. We have one comment online. Patrick McGivney, please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. And this has to do with the budget that we have on the consent agenda.
No, this is, no. This is just for the, her location on the board right now, Patrick. We'll come back to
Oh,
consent
Sorry, I thought you
agenda in a
said
minute.
consent agenda. You have number 6 consent agenda down there, so I'm a little confused. I'll wait
Yeah.
for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there's no other comments online.
All right, seeing then we'll move on to the consent agenda, which is item number 6. So Daniel, do you want to take that over at this point?
Sure. I mean, consent agenda is relatively self-explanatory, but yeah, we have meeting minutes. Well, first we have the updated budget register for calendar 2022, and then meeting minutes from our July 28th BMC meeting.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
No question.
It's your first opportunity to go on. Nope. All right, we have no questions. We'll open it for public comment now.
If you'd like to make a comment online, please raise your hand or come up to the podium in person.
This is your turn. This is your opportunity, Patrick.
Okay,
Patrick, please
I-
unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes.
I did. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this does have to do with the budget here. I noticed that in the budget that we had spent $7,500 on stream flow gauge, but now you want to use the rest of that money for other purposes. What will happen with that expenditure, the $7,500 that was already spent? Is that going to be returned, or are we going to be doing the rain gauge again at some point, the stream gauge, or how is that going to work? It's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, Lindy.
Good afternoon, Lindy Owen, Los Osos. I just, looking over the costs of holding these meetings, I just was wondering what the 5,000 per meeting covers is. I don't see any breakdown to AGP or any, we don't have humans involved anymore. So it just seems like it's an ongoing cost every month, 5,000 and then 1,500 to rent the room. I wonder if there's any way that that can be cut back and the money used for more important things. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindy.
There are no more public comments.
Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back. Would you like to answer the questions, Daniel, please?
Sure. Yeah, so the first question was about the stream gauge. Sorry, it was the Los Osos Creek stream gauge rating curve. And so, yeah, so approximately $7,500 was spent in early 2022, both, purchasing equipment as well as mobilizations for a number of those limited early season storms that we had. As we exited the rainy season, the ability to collect data to create the rating curve was really no longer available. And so it was really envisioned that those funds were going to go largely unutilized throughout the rest of the year, unless we get some, large early season storms here in the rest of 2022. So the intent of repurposing that budget was to use it for other purposes that could be spent within this calendar year, because under the current sort of organizational structure of the BMC, we don't have the ability to roll that budget over. The development of a rating curve for the Los Osos Creek stream gauge is still an important initiative to the BMC, and hopefully one that we can fund in calendar year 2023. And we'll be having those discussions and in the next couple of months as we go through the calendar year 2023 BMC budget. And then there was another question about meeting expenses. So I think what was referenced was the 1,500 for facilities rent and the 6,000 for audio and visual services. So those are budgeted amounts. And if you look at the invoice register and the cost summary tables, you can see that we actually haven't charged towards those budget items. So our meeting costs are very low currently, given the current location and the level of technology that's being utilized. A lot of that in large part is thanks to the Los Osos CSD, who's letting us utilize their boardroom here and lending their services towards helping us facilitate these in-person and remote quote unquote hybrid meetings.
Is that it, Daniel?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, bring it back for comments and a motion.
I'll move approval of consent.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, Daniel, could you take a roll call, please?
And Beth, you may need to bear with me for a couple of meetings here as I work on this. Director Reinke?
Yes. So is this the opportunity where I would, I guess, let you know what S&T's wishes were for the upcoming budget, or is this just discussing the current budget?
This is just the current.
Okay, then I'm good. Thank you.
Director Gibson?
Yes.
Director Zimmer?
Yes.
Chair Ohilsky?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0.
Okay, then with that, we'll move on to item number 7, which is for public comments on items not appearing on the agenda. So this is the opportunity for the public to talk about things that are not on the agenda, but still they must be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the BMC. So if you would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand online or step up to the podium and I'll turn it over to Julian.
All right, if you'd like to make a comment online, please raise your hand or come up to the podium. We have 2 online so far. We'll start with Jeff Edwards. Please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Edwards, and this month I received a notice from a gentleman by the name of Joshua Montoya regarding this meeting, the BMC's regular meeting of September 21st. And I guess I'm a little confused, and perhaps staff can answer this, but Joshua Montoya is a project coordinator with the firm, the Hallmark Group. And they're a big company. I thought this was actually from a Central Coast Water Authority posting, but so the Hallmark Group, what is their role? Or is this some kind of mistake? When did we hire these guys, if we did? So that's my question. What role is the Hallmark Group and Mr. Montoya? And is that something new? And how did we get here? Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll answer the question at the end.
All right, next, Patrick McGivney, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. All right. So the Los Osos Community Plan speaks of a sustainable yield, and the stipulated judgment set the sustainable yield at 2,400 acre feet in 2016. But we know the BMC incorrectly changed it at that time to 2,760 acre feet yearly. But in 2017, the Cleese-Harris Group performed a climate change analysis of the Los Osos groundwater basin sustainable yield under 2012 basin conditions. And the analysis included a sustainable yield evaluation in response to global warming, which simulated air temperature rise, sea level rise, and reduced precipitation. And baseline, mid-century, and late-century scenarios were analyzed under 2 levels of global greenhouse gas emissions. Scenarios were based on 2016 precipitation being at 100%, 90%, 80%, and 67%. And for some reason, the 100% scenario was chosen, which set the sustainable yield at 2,760 acre feet a year, which we now know is incorrect. Why was this one chosen? If 90% had been used, the sustainable yield would have been 2,490 acre feet. If 80%, it would have been 2,220 acre feet. And at 67%, it would have been, which was more realistic, 1,870 acre feet yearly. Why? Way below the estimated 2,380 of today's sustainable yield estimate. And here's the kicker though. If 90% of our estimated rainfall was used by the BMC, at that time, the BYM, the basin yield metric, would have been 87 with an extraction of 1,990 acre feet. If 80% of estimated rainfall was used by the BYM would have been 97 with a production of 1,780 acre feet. And if you so boldly had used the 67% of estimated precipitation, the 2016 BYM would have been 1,500 acre feet, not the 2,010 acre feet produced. And we wonder why we're in overdraft at this point. Please explain why we used 100% precipitation with this report instead of at least a 90 or 80%, let alone 67%, which is probably where it would have been. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrick.
Right, there are no more comments online. Oh, come up to the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. Becky McFarland, another beautiful day in our beautiful town. I was reading over a joint letter from the water purveyors and what they were saying to the county. And this was about the ADU ordinance, but it still applies today to what, I mean, people are seeing buildings still going on, and I realize those are older permits, but I wanted to read this. It's titled Monitoring Data and Metrics Deserve More Emphasis. As reported in the 2020 annual report, both the monitoring data and the basic metrics indicate the basin conditions as a whole are static and worsening. I should say there were some very small improvements to a couple of the metrics last year. Unfortunately, sustainable management of groundwater resources is not often achieved quickly and instead takes years of continued effort to begin seeing results. Based on the trends and monitoring results published in previous annual reports it may take several more years before it is possible to determine whether implementation of the basin plan has been successful in reversing seawater intrusion and improving other favorable water quality trends. Prior to being asked to serve additional demand, therefore, the basin metrics must indicate not only an end to deteriorating conditions, but measurable and sustainable improvements across the basin. It may also be necessary to consider creative water supply options, which I know is being done, such as supplemental or imported water in order to solve the long-term water issues. My question is, what is measurable and sustainable? I mean, it was measurable that our water level with sea level went up from 1.8 feet above sea level to 2.3, was it? I can't remember the exact number, and it's very small. Is that counted as measurable? Or are we thinking bigger as being measurable and sustainable? Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindy Owen again. I guess my comment continues on the ones that I've introduced in the past, and it's this idea that we are looking at the glass half full, when since the early 70s, we've known that the basin was heading towards crisis with seawater intrusion. And in reality, it hasn't changed. We're trying to throw money at it and solutions, and it continues invading our lower basin and our drinking supply. I just feel in some ways we keep trying to have a positive outlook, which is, you know, a great thing. But in reality, I think that we need to take much more caution and look around all of California, look around at climate change, look around at our rainfall, and understand that this is a different scenario. So while we try to operate on rational solutions from the past, I really think that putting new houses in and, you know, allowing new growth is just ridiculously naive and not very careful planning. The idea of a pipeline to come in and add to what we know is a diminishing supply, or we're thinking of putting one in because of that. Again, just if we don't have enough for the people that are here currently, why would we even talk about bringing more water in? That's, you know, you could go ahead and say climate change is going to turn us into like a little India, and we're going to have, you know, 2 feet of rain every couple months. I don't see that as coming our direction. And I don't think that we should be operating on any kind of a positive, you know, dream that we have enough water for any new growth. And again, we need to look at the data. The data that Patrick just discussed is pretty serious. When you pick those rosy numbers and use those to operate everything that we throw hundreds of thousands at, it just becomes kind of questionable. And my last point is, I don't understand how the county can put in just 16% towards the cost of the basin management when not one of their ratepayers, they don't have ratepayers, private wells haven't put 1 penny forward to either clean the water or to cause a direction towards preserving it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindy.
There's now one more comment online. Emily Meggins, please unmute yourself.
Hi, maybe at some point, someone from the county, I know the purveyors, at least the commercial purveyors can't discuss it. And I know our CSD manager wrote a paper debating about guest houses, and maybe that was a solution to population growth. I'm just really wondering, and it's beyond wondering, the public is wondering and asking me questions online about how things like quote unquote guest houses are going to be regulated. How is the county ensuring, without making residents have to be the, blow the whistle, how is the county ensuring that these guest homes are not being lived in full time? what are the measurement steps that you're using? Have you hired a staff beyond compliance already to, I guess, drive around and routinely check? Are these things being used within the policy that SLO County has put forward for whether you're living in a guest house or not, or maybe even renting it out under the radar screen? Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Right, now there's another comment online. Ronnie G, please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Ronnie, and it seems to me that we are.
Could you speak up, Ronnie? Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Not too well.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay. It seems to me that we're in this position of having to talk about guest houses and the draconian impositions from the states because we have failed to accommodate housing in general for all these in all the municipalities in the states. So we are facing and having to deal with this challenge. How do we apply for all of these mandates that we're not able to accommodate? It seems to me that the growth management plan that the county has is very responsible. Actually, I don't believe that is by any means extreme or unfeasible. So I believe that we can live with this growth management that it has been stipulated by the management plan, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
There are no more comments.
Julian, could we find out what Ronnie G's actual name is? Because we need it for the record.
Yes. Ronnie, if you could type your name into the chat, please. For the Q&A.
So you got
It is Ronnie Giron, Giron.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure for the record we had the correct name. Okay, with that, then we'll go ahead and close public comment. I think primarily we had two topics. One was the sustainable yield, which I think we've talked about numerous times every meeting. But I'll let Daniel cover that in a minute. But first of all, Bruce, would you like to go ahead and speak about the county's role and the ADUs and the guest houses, et cetera, please?
The matter of ADUs is still under discussion between county planning and coastal commission. And indeed, ADUs and guest houses are planning level issues that we're discussing through our planning department. And as to the water use of a guest house is considered just another bedroom not attached to a house, not having a full kitchen. It's not permitted as a full-time dwelling unit. And so the water use is assumed to be consistent with that of a single family residence. So that's how we deal with it.
Okay. And I think if anybody has any questions, more detail about this, you should contact county planning directly and ask the question of them, since they're the ones that have the detailed information on this particular topic, and we don't, quite frankly. And it's outside our purview. We're not doing planning here. So I think, is that correct, Bruce?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then. I know we've heard about sustainable yield before, and I know we've discussed it before, but Daniel, could you just give us a little recap on what was discussed today, if there was anything new, or how we're addressing it as we move forward with sustainable yield for the upcoming year?
Definitely. Yeah, so as many of us know, the BMC went through an extensive evaluation of the sustainable yield estimate for the Los Osos Basin in 2021. That ultimately, culminated in the selection of an updated sustainable yield estimate for the basin of 2,380 acre feet on October 27th, 2021. And that established the sustainable yield that we are utilizing for this calendar year 2022. In that analysis, we looked at all of the factors that impact the sustainable yield estimate, including rainfall, We updated the long-term average rainfall value that is incorporated into the model that is used to calculate the sustainable yield to account for additional drought years and additional dry years that we had observed in the recent past. We, and through doing that, lowered the long-term average rainfall assumption. It is worth noting, and one of the key findings from that 2012 study was that the sustainable yield is roughly proportional to the long-term average rainfall, which makes sense. As a basin with as our only source of supply, the primary source of recharge is recharge from Los Osos Creek, which would be rainfall runoff, as well as any other recharge that could occur within the basin. If we see less rainfall over the long term, then we would see less recharge and then see a decrease in our sustainable yield estimate. But we are utilizing the best available rainfall data that we have, the most recent rainfall data available. We are looking at a long-term average because, though we are seeing climate change impacts, those impacts are, contributing to both longer dry periods, but the more intense wet periods. And so we are trying to account for that with a long-term average that incorporates both wet and dry periods. The real takeaway for me on all this is it continues to speak to the need for a transient model. We're having to use simplified assumptions in our sustainable yield estimate because we are working with the steady state model and needing to select one rainfall value. With the transient model, we can plug in a variable hydrologic pattern that includes both wet and dry years and do a better job of evaluating the impact that would have on the sustainable yield of the basin. I'll cover this in my executive director's report, but we will be reevaluating the sustainable yield for calendar year 2022 and the upcoming meetings. And so another opportunity to continue this discussion. And then there was one other question about the Hallmark Group. I will take a crack at this. Blaine, can correct me, or Director Gibson. But so with the creation of the Groundwater Sustainability Department, the purview of the managed basins has transitioned from the Public Works Department to the Groundwater Sustainability Department. And one of the roles that Public Works was providing was maintaining the BMC's website on the county's webpage, as well as notifications of parties interested in BMC activities. And so that role has transitioned to the Groundwater Sustainability Department. To support the Groundwater Sustainability Department, they hired a consultant, the Hallmark Group, to assist with some of their management activities. And just through that transition between the departments is why Joshua Montoya with the Hallmark Group was the one that sent out the BMC agenda packet email. We are having active conversations with Blaine and his group on how to best structure this so we can work efficiently and make sure that everybody gets the proper notifications. So this may change in the future, but for now, you may see emails coming from Joshua or his counterparts in the near term.
No, thank you, Daniel. I had that same question because I didn't understand why they were doing that particular item. So appreciate it. Okay, so we'll close public comment on items not appearing on the agenda. And we'll move to item number 8, which is the executive director's report. Daniel, this is in your court here.
Thank you, Marshall. Let me find my place here. I guess first item, executive director's report. As you have probably noticed, I'm not there in person today. I am recovering from COVID, and so, and out of abundance of caution, felt that it was better to attend remotely. But looking forward to being back in person at our October meeting. Digging into the report, I would like to start out with an item that I didn't include. It was an oversight on my part in the executive director's report, but want to bring it to the BMC's attention. I have been requested by the regional board to provide a presentation on October 14th to the Central Coast Regional Board on the Los Osos Basin. The regional board has an agenda item to receive presentations from multiple basins throughout their region to provide, I think primarily it's to get an update on SGMA activities, management activities, and their impacts on those basins. But I think they thought it was also would be beneficial to get a report on a non-SGMA or adjudicated basin, and thus invited me to provide them with the presentation. It'll be, as I understand it, a relatively high-level presentation, just providing an overview of the general Los Osos Basin organizational structure, description of, our priorities, and any monitoring or metrics that we utilize, description of challenges that are being faced, initiatives that are being implemented, and stakeholder engagement activities. So wanted to make BMC aware of that, and everyone's welcome to attend that meeting on October 14th of 2022. Moving into the executive director's report, the first update is on the water recycling funding program grant opportunity. Hopefully those people recall, so the Los Osos CSD on behalf of the BMC submitted a grant application requesting $150,000 in grant funding to support the development of a transient model for the Los Osos Basin. We've been waiting on notification from the State Water Resource Control Board on that grant application, and were recently actually contacted by the state board asking the CSD, and by default the BMC, if they would be interested in waiting in order to be eligible for additional grant funding. The State Water Board is increasing the total grant award amount from $150,000 to $250,000, and so BMC party staff is currently evaluating this opportunity. We've asked some questions of the state board with respect to timing. How much time would we need to wait to be eligible for this larger grant amount? And then we also need to evaluate whether or not there is sufficient match funding available to be eligible for that larger grant amount. The larger grant amount would provide significant advantages to the BMC, would allow for the development of a higher quality model, additional modeling scenario analysis, and largely lead to a better product and tool set for use by the BMC for a number of initiatives, including, as I described earlier, estimating the sustainable yield. We're looking at strategies to try to leverage already anticipated costs or BMC budgeted items as that additional match funding. So ideally, we can come up with a way to access that additional match funding without needing to contribute any additional BMC funds that wasn't already going to be contributed to other initiatives. So more to come on that. Moving down to the sustainable yield estimate. I think I described the sustainable yield activities that occurred in 2021. Prior to the beginning of 2023, the BMC is tasked with estimating a sustainable yield estimate for 2023. At this point, BMC staff is recommending that the BMC retain the existing sustainable yield estimate of 2,380 acre-feet per year established for 2022, and retain that as the same estimate to be utilized for calendar year 2023 for the following reasons. One, no new infrastructure not considered in the 2022 sustainable yield estimate has been constructed since we last estimated the sustainable yield. Two, the estimates of the development of the Broderson Mound and long-term average rainfall were updated in 2021 and incorporated in the 2022 sustainable yield estimate and are not anticipated to change significantly year over year. We would likely want to revisit those after 3-5 years, but the change on a year over year basis likely doesn't warrant the cost and effort required to update the sustainable yield estimate. And then three, no significant hydrogeologic investigations have been conducted that would warrant an update to the steady state groundwater model utilized to develop the calendar year 2022 sustainable yield estimate. We haven't done any large scale hydrogeologic investigations that would warrant a model update. So this is just a kind of a primer, additional information and on the methodologies for the 2022 estimate is included in the October 27th BMC meeting agenda packet. And the determination, the formal determination of the calendar year 2023 sustainable yield estimate will be brought to the BMC as a formal item before the end of this year. Just skipping by some of the brief updates. There was the funding and organizational plan. We received a very informative presentation from SCI Consulting Group at our last meeting. BMC staff is continuing to work with SCI to develop a work plan and budget that would outline the key decision points, timelines, and costs associated with moving from the BMC's current relatively informal structure to a more formal organizational and potential funding structure. And that timeline, work plan, and budget will be brought to the BMC at a future meeting. The BMC Legal Counsel update, we have a dedicated agenda item for that later in the meeting. And only just one update from the county planning initiatives. At the August 9th, 2022 hearing, the county staff requested that the hearing on the ADU ordinance be continued, and that request was approved by the Board of Supervisors. And then finally, a couple of exciting updates with respect to the status of basin plan infrastructure projects. The CSD continues to make good progress towards implementation of both Program A and C initiatives. The first project, the 8th Street Upper Well, is fully equipped, permitted, and is awaiting on, or was awaiting on, may now have received the final electrical inspection and the ability to bring that upper 8th Street well online before the end of this month. That upper 8th Street well will allow the Los Osos CSD to pump upper aquifer water at its 8th Street well location and reducing the pressure on the lower aquifer in that region. And then the update for Program C is that the CSD has finished installation of the well casing and packing for the expansion well number 2 and is currently working on well development activities. And we'll have the well construction completed by the beginning of October. The CSD is currently designing the pipeline that will allow it to connect the well to its distribution system, and envisions that construction of the pipeline and all other project components to be completed by June of 2024. And that concludes my executive director's report.
Thank you, Daniel. We have any questions from board members? Yes, Mark?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Yes,
No comments now?
I'm sorry. You can do either.
So the additional grant funding for our model, that's going to well received. I know you mentioned the matching funds. Have we actually looked at what that would be? I think the description of the model with additional funds would be a higher quality product. I'd kind of like to know what that is, have a little more background and in-depth discussion on that. If we are moving that way and it is going to be additional funds, I think that would warrant a further and deeper discussion, and maybe even a presentation at one of our BMC meetings. And then the sustainable yield presentation, in agreement with what you discussed about the sustainable yield and the projects and the rain and the hydro investigation. But I think it is good to continue talking about it. There's always questions and discussions around that. And so I believe that October 17th, having that presentation, I would support that to continue the discussion further and hearing the public and just back and forth discussion from staff on that is helpful. That is those are my two questions.
You can, if you have something after public comment, you can have some more.
All right. Thanks, Marshall.
Either of you have anything to say at this point? No. Okay, so we'll go to public comment then.
Can I,
please, at
can I
this point.
respond to those questions first, Marshall?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you can respond to Mark's questions. Yes.
Yeah, no, good questions, Director Zimmer. Yeah, if staff believes that going after the larger grant amount is warranted, we would definitely bring an item back to the BMC for consideration and provide more specifics on, what that additional grant funding would provide at the opportunity to incorporate into the project. Some of the preliminary thoughts that we've had at a staff level is the potential to, again, just leverage already anticipated funds. So for example, the BMC had budgeted $30,000 for a peer review of the transient model development. Under the original proposal, we weren't getting any corresponding match funds for that peer review. So if we incorporated that into the overall proposal, that $30,000 could be used to leverage another $30,000 of grant funds for the overall project without any additional costs to the BMC. The other item that we've considered for incorporating as match funds is later on the agenda, but would be the ITRC ag demand estimate evaluation. That is information that would feed directly into the model, and we believe would be a strong candidate for match funds as well. So those are the types of items that are being considered for increasing the potential grant amount. But yeah, again, we'll bring more specifics and a more formal item to the BMC. That's the direction that the BMC would like to head. And then also, yes, the sustainable yield estimate we'll bring that forth either at the October or November meeting and have that opportunity for that public dialogue and to again, share information for how those numbers are developed. What are the key assumptions that go into that analysis? And then what are the implications of the numbers that come out of that?
Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Now we'll go to public comment, Julian.
If you'd like to make a comment online, please raise your hand or come up to the podium. We have one comment online. Jeff Edwards, please unmute yourself.
Thank you again, Jeff Edwards. And I wanted to speak to this question of sustainable yield that's on page 3 of the ED's report. And as Dan mentioned, staff is recommending that the BMC retain the current sustainable yield estimate at 2,380 acre feet per year, which appears at this point to be fairly settled. But it goes on to say that this will be retained, the 2,380 will be retained because no new infrastructure not already considered in the 2022 sustainable yield estimate has been constructed. So I better understand this, and for clarification, we have 3 pending infrastructure projects. That's the 8th Street Upper Aquifer well under Program A, and then we have the Program C number 2 and number 3 wells. The number 2 well, which was reported, has been cased and is probably going to be in operation in late 2023, perhaps 2024. So my question, and let me add that Cleith Harris Group is currently, through a tech memo, evaluating the anticipated increase in sustainable yield from those 2 Program C wells. That's number 2 and number 3. So if the BMC is going to consider additional discussion of the sustainable yield in October or November, will the Cleith Harris Group tech memo regarding Program C number 2 and number 3 wells, will that be included in that agenda item? That's my main question. And then again, by way of clarification, it appears, at least my recollection, is the upper aquifer 8th Street well was included in the 2380, but clearly neither of the program C wells, that's number 2 and number 3. So that would be the other part of the question. Summarizing, will the Cleeth Harris tech memo regarding the yield from program C number 2 and 3 well be included in the October, November BMC meeting on the topic? And then what wells have already been counted in that sustainable yield? Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. You have anybody else online, Julian?
We do, yeah. Patrick McGibney, please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just start off regarding the link to Title 19 Midas report. The link does not work. When will this report be out and available? And just out of curiosity, why do so many of the links that are presented on these agenda packages don't actually work? So we're moving on. Project financing is a big hurdle for the BMC, and that's why I was stunned when I read that $23 million was awarded to 2 major water projects in the county from federal funds that were available to the BMC also, but our basin received $0, not a penny. The water projects that received money were for recycling water, but the money was available to worthy water basins of all natures. Congressman Carbajal secured millions of dollars for Central Coast infrastructure projects benefiting community needs. Cambria received $200,000 for their desal plant. San Ynez wastewater treatment plant received $160,000. City of Guadalupe Park, they received $1,700,000. But again, the Los Osos Basin received nothing. And speaking with Carvajal's office, I was told that the reason we didn't receive anything was because no one applied. All counties and CSDs were notified. Why did not the county or the Los Osos Sustainability or Los Osos Community Service District apply for any of these needed and available funds? After 7 years of management, we are far behind in completing projects that need to be done to better understand the condition of our basin by implementing potential improvements to the existing BMC monitoring program, additional monitoring wells, basic evaluation of metrics, which have all been postponed until the modification of existing wells or new monitoring wells can be evaluated. One major drawback in their implementation is the lack of financing to get these projects done in a timely manner. An adjudicated basin like we are is not eligible for SGMA grants. The next best option for funding would be through a joint powers agreement. As your consultant SCI presented in the last meeting, a JPA would allow you several taxing options and options that would level the playing field where every stakeholder would be paying an equitable share of the expenses. And as you know, right now, the bulk is paid by those of us in the moratorium area. If you are planning on bringing in a pipeline from Morro Bay, a JPA would be necessary to facilitate this process. So it would be advisable to start on that moving ahead as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, no one else online.
Becky McFarland again. And I did want to say, it's great to see so many people here. This is awesome. That's what community should do. My question from the last time wasn't answered about the numbers for provable and measurable and sustainable water supply. Dan missed that one. And then also when we ask questions, there's no time to ask an additional question. And I know that how this runs, but there's a lot of people that don't know a lot about what's happening with our water. And so if maybe one additional question could be asked to clarify, it made me think of, as a teacher, we were taught to use check for understanding to make sure that the class was understanding what we said to them or what we answered their questions. So I think that would really help to make sure that people are understanding what's being said. And also, if there isn't to be discussion taking place here with the community, where is it supposed to happen? One of the best basin talk discussions I heard was at LOCAC when Chuck Sasena came and discussed some things, and it was really good. And there were some questions allowed. Another question is with this 8th Street well, and it's going down into the upper aquifer. So it's getting that water, and I know it's being blended. What's the ratio of that polluted, because it is polluted with nitrates in our upper aquifer? What's the ratio on that? And where do we find that sort of thing out? And where are the blending happenings? I think I find it interesting as a teacher and someone interested in science and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Terry Simons. I live in Morro Bay, but I have clients here in the Los Osos area. I have 2 items. My first item is very small, and I was hoping Charlie would actually be here today because I've asked this question several previous meetings. The last time I asked it, I got an answer that seems to be different from what's in the report today. This is on page 10 of 11 of the main report, and it's the very last item, the S&T and Golden State Water System interconnection. This shows us a pending project with a budget of $30,000, and it says it's currently on hold. The last time I asked about the status of this, I was told by Charlie that that was completed. I'd like to get a definitive answer today, if possible, what the real status of that project is. Not to overshadow that, I too have concerns about the ability of the BMC to move forward to a joint powers agreement. And oddly enough, on the bottom of page 911 of the report in the footnote section, there's a number 4 footnote that wasn't actually in the body of the document. But as I was reading it, it quoted a section of the Water Department's bulletin that said a basin is subject to critical conditions of overdraft when continuation of present water management practices would probably result in significant adverse overdraft related environmental, social, and economic impacts. Taking a rather radical interpretation of that statement, I think it could be argued that in the 7+ years that the BMC has been operating as a management practice, it probably has reached a point of criticalness that management practice be modified such that we don't continue to have an adverse overdraft. And if in fact that is the case, then perhaps the rejection of our opportunities to get funding because we're not considered in critical overdraft could be rethought. And that's probably a good first task for that $200,000 a year lawyer you're getting ready to hire. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindy Owen again. I had a couple points that I wanted to ask about. I was also very curious about Becky's question about the 8th Street well and how much blending is going on with that. I'm not sure if people are aware that the upper aquifer is an abundant resource, although polluted. So we don't really talk a lot about the use of that basin. And maybe that's what people like Jeff Edwards consider the sustainable yield, because basically the lower basin is finite. We put a straw in further inland, and then we say we've got more water. We don't. A straw is a straw, whether it's drawing in salt water because it's too close to the edge of the saltwater intrusion, or if you move it to the other side, it's still the same amount of water in that basin. And when there was discussion about the sustainable yield, no new infrastructure, excuse me, drive down Pine and look at the mega mansion that is going in there. That was applied and permitted within the last 6 months. There are numerous projects going on here. The county does not like to share them with LOCAC or the land use because they don't have to. And there are projects going on. And whether you sit and say it's just a little, one more family, it really doesn't matter because the people moving into these places can use all the water they want as long as they have a hefty bank account. So yeah, and I wonder why the county has to continue with this ADU discussion. The county seems to be the slowest thing past the banded snail. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more public comments.
Okay, thank you. Oops. So, Daniel, do you have anything that you'd like to respond to? And maybe after you're done, then Mr. Gibson, if you have anything that the county would like to respond to.
Yes, Marshall, I can respond to some of the questions. Yeah, there were some good technical questions. So first off, with the statement about no new infrastructure, since the infrastructure that was incorporated into the calendar year 2022 sustainable yield estimate. So first off, when we talk about infrastructure that goes into the sustainable yield estimate, we're talking about water infrastructure, wells, primarily wells, the locations and the capacities of those wells. But yes, and so specifically, what projects were included in the calendar year 2022 estimate was the 8th Street Upper Aquifer well. So the additional yield and the ability to shift pumping from the lower aquifer to the upper aquifer was already accounted for in that sustainable yield estimate. The programs 2 and 3, program C, sorry, 2 and 3 wells, aren't included in that, as those projects have yet to be realized or aren't anticipated to be realized in the time frame that we're developing the estimate for. So this year, we're developing the estimate for 2023. The CSD currently predicts that the second program C well won't come online until 2024. So, potentially we could consider incorporating that infrastructure in the calendar year 2024 sustainable yield estimate, but not the 2023. And then the third program C well would be further out than that. There was a question about whether the Cleeth Harris TM that estimates the amount of additional sustainable yield that these additional program C wells will provide. Yeah, that information likely will be available for the BMC's consideration, but again, because it's predictive increases in sustainable yield for infrastructure that won't be constructed within the calendar year 2023, I wouldn't recommend that we incorporate it into the sustainable yield estimate for that year. There was a question about the links in the executive director's report. I feel your frustration. I have messed with those links a number of times. They work in the Word document. When it exports to a PDF, one of the several, or at least one of them, the one specific to the county's water offset program, doesn't work. I don't know what else I can do. I put the full URL for that webpage in there. So even though the link isn't clickable, you could at least, type it in or copy and paste and gain access. I would also say, Google is pretty good about getting you what you need. And if you type in Los Osos water offset study, it takes you directly to the county's webpage for that initiative. Looking at some other questions, so there was a question about what is measurable and sustainable. I mean, in response to that question, I would point the commenter to the annual report and the basin yield metrics and the water level metric and the chloride metric and the water level data and the water quality data. I mean, that is the data that the BMC collects, analyzes, interprets, and utilizes for making its basin management decisions, such as establishing the sustainable yield for the basin. I can speak briefly to the 8th Street Upper Aquifer well, but the CSD really is the authority on this. But my understanding is that at least initial water quality from the Upper 8th Street well has shown that it is actually low in nitrate concentration, which is a promising development. And so there's the potential that well could be used and contribute water to the system without blending, as long as the nitrate concentrations stay low. However, if they do rise with continued use, then the CSD would need to and would blend with lower aquifer water, the ratios of that blend, would be driven by the concentrations of nitrates in both of those water sources. There was a question about the S&T and Golden State intertie in the executive director's report. And that, yeah, that is an old description. The latest description that we've received from S&T and Golden State on that project is actually included in the calendar year 2021 annual report. That description says that the interconnection is currently on hold pending further evaluation of the project. I believe it's a little bit more nuanced than that. And again, I would defer to S&T and Golden State representatives for more information. But my understanding is that there is currently a 2-inch interconnection between those systems that could allow potentially for some emergency water to transfer, but that this project really envisions a larger interconnection, and that project, at least is characterized in the annual report, is currently on hold pending further evaluation. And I think that addresses the questions that I wrote down.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to speak about the blending, Margaret, or?
Ron Munz, Los Osos CSD. Yeah, the water quality, Dan was correct. The nitrates came in at 2.1 with the MCL being at 10. So it's extremely low. This is characterized by our 3rd Street well, which is an upper aquifer zone C, similar water quality. We don't know. Spencer seems to think it's a nuance of how the zone C is partitioned geologically over on that side of town. So we're looking at really going to use cut lower aquifer production, since it's showing impacts on the monitoring well at Pasadena and doing straight draw from the upper aquifer. And we anticipate be able to get about 100 to 120 acre feet a year out of that.
Okay, thank you. You guys want to talk about the intertie at all, or? I mean, it's
Yeah,
just a short question, so.
No, yeah, I don't mind talking about it. So Dan's right. There is a 2-inch interconnection that is in place for emergency assistance. I think the intent of this interconnection was included in the basin plan early as a mechanism to convey water throughout Los Osos. And so it's been deferred. There's really not a project or the projects that the water that was going to be conveyed in this interconnection project, that project hasn't been established or defined or anything like that. So to spend the money to build the interconnection without the resource or the need or what have you, just put it in that deferred status for right now. So I think it's one of our tools that we have to manage the basin, and when the timing's right, we'll come back to that project and discuss it further. So.
All right, thank you. Bruce, do you have any response to the county?
My only comments would be on the question of the transient model. I think it's good news that we are offered the potential for a larger grant. That means we do have to come up with another $100,000 of match, which is a good problem to have. And I think I've talked to Dan a bit about this. We already have 30 committed to that project. We have a potential of this turf and irrigation demand that could be another one. And so I think we can piece this together. That is a matter of pointing us toward our budget development for the next calendar year, which is coming up right away. I would hope that we could try to work on this sooner rather than later. We are well behind in having an appropriately state-of-the-art model of this basin, in the sense of having a transient model. So we need to get that in place, and we need to get working on it so we can make sure that our adaptive management is underlain by the most appropriate technical base. I would just also observe there tend to be a lot of detailed questions that come up during this. This is a business meeting of the BMC, And while those are good questions, and I think everybody should, get themselves educated on this, I think it might be more efficient if those questions could be submitted in writing to appropriate members of the BMC or to Dan if it's not known exactly who this is. We can get those questions out, and in the course of this periods between these meetings, we can get those questions answered. But I don't see that a long and detailed discussion of these things, which do come up very specifically when we consider things like the safe yield calculation or our budget or the other items that we have over the course of the year to make decisions here. I think those are the appropriate times to have these discussions, and would be better, I think, to clear this time that is not long with us to have productive discussions on the specifics of the things that are agendized.
Okay, thank you. So with that, then we'll move on to item number 9B, pardon me. I was going back over 9A, I just was. So 9B is a recommendation for selection of RWG to provide contract legal counsel for the BMC. Or that's, you ready, Daniel?
I am. Thank you, Marshall. So as the BMC knows, in the calendar year 22 budget, the BMC approved $20,000 for legal counsel contingency and authorized the executive director to utilize up to 5,000 of that with the need to get additional approval from the BMC. To identify a firm to provide that legal counsel support, BMC staff developed a request for qualifications that was presented to the BMC and approved. That RFQ was released, and the BMC received 7 SOQs, or statement of qualifications. BMC staff then, and party staff, including involvement from each of the parties, shortlisted those 7 firms to 4 firms and conducted interviews with those 4 firms. And based on the review of the SOQs and the interviews with the selected firms, BMC party staff is recommending selection of Richard Watson Gershon, RWG Law, to provide legal counsel to the BMC. RWG Law is recommended based on their combination of experience and approach to providing contract legal services for clients needing support with basin adjudication compliance, forming and managing JPAs, general municipal law, and special taxes and other funding mechanism implementation. And included in the agenda packet is the statement of qualifications from RWG Law for those that would like to review any of their additional qualifications. And I believe Craig Steele with our RWG is available as an attendee, and if we have questions, he can respond to them.
Okay.
Craig, you're unmuted if you'd like to speak.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board. Happy to be with you. I'm not quite sure how to turn my video on, but I am pleased to be recommended to help provide legal services to the BMC. Look forward to working with you all if we are selected, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is that the end of the presentation then, Daniel?
Yeah, sorry, Chair Ohilsky. Yes, that ends my presentation.
Okay, do we have some questions before we go to public comment or comments? I did have a question. So I see that David Fleischman is a local attorney. Will he be the one primarily representing the BMC, or will it just be spread out over staff? So this is a question for Craig.
No, Chair, the proposal is for me to be primarily responsible for the BMC and for Dave and my other colleague in San Luis Obispo, Chelsea O'Sullivan, to provide backup, as well as anybody else from the firm that might be needed for a particular matter. I presently work half of my time in the San Luis Obispo office and half of my time in Los Angeles, and would serve you from the San Luis Obispo office.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to clarify that. Okay, so let's go to public comment, Julian.
If you'd like to make a comment online, please raise your hand or come up to the podium in person. Jeff Edwards, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Edwards, and frankly, I have to go on the record as being opposed to the retention of this law firm to represent the executive director. Not that this firm isn't a good firm, but we already have a number of lawyers involved, not only as staff, but on the BMC. So, you know, at some point, there's just it becomes so top heavy, the administration. We don't need the executive director on the phone with legal counsel. I just don't think it's necessary. And then there's the coincidence, if you will, and that is Fleischman's connected to this firm, and he's involved in Central Coast Blue. And as some of you may know, Mr. Heimel is a Central Coast Blue, well, formerly with that project, all in Pismo Beach. I think it's incestuous. I think it's unnecessary. And we don't need to create a fiefdom that then we need to have a funding mechanism for. It's all a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I object to this retention of counsel, and I certainly object to the ongoing discussion of SCI and additional work plan and budget. We don't need to spend our money on these items. Let's focus on infrastructure projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Anybody else online, Julian?
No one else online.
Anybody in person?
Terry Simons again. The rare occasion that I would agree with Jeff Edwards is one of these moments. I was quite frankly impressed by and appalled by the presentation of the awarded or tentatively awarded legal firm. Brings to mind a Chinese saying, "Don't use a cannon to kill a fly." I think that the firm that's been nominated for retention is very impressive, and this speaks nothing to Mr. Steele as an attorney or any of his associates. I don't get it. I've been here for a long time in the county. I've watched the activities of numerous boards and numerous councils and boards of supervisors and city councils, and I see the evolution of legal counsel becoming a virtual seat at the table at every meeting. And at the proposed rates, it seems very economical to have a $350 an hour lawyer on board. But if that lawyer's participation becomes minimum at every meeting, you're probably looking at $3,000 a meeting for legal participation to review your agenda and make legal comment. I concur with Mr. Edwards' position that I think the funds of the BMC should be spent on developing infrastructure projects, delivering water, and taking a more creative look at how more water can be delivered to the basin and less spent on legal consultation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindy Owen again. I totally agree with the last two speakers. Too many lawyers. Every CSD has a lawyer. Golden State has lawyers. The information is, I think, available without having to have somebody. My question was, is this, will Craig Steele or his representative be sitting at every meeting? I just don't see where we need that. If we need to go out and get a specific legal question and, dealt with, let's go visit Mr. Steele. But at this point, just it's a big waste of money. I think that our infrastructure is what we need to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindy.
Becky McFarland. I'm not sure what to say about legal, but if we could save money by not doing that, it would be good. What I do have a question is, where are community members supposed to go online to get people-friendly, regular citizen education about our aquifer? The BMC reports are not, I mean, most of us are college educated. A lot of people in town aren't. That doesn't mean they're not smart, but I read through those and I really had to study to figure out what some of those things meant. So let's spend money on educating our community about our aquifer and our water and water saving programs. I know that CSD and other things, but I know CSD water use went up from the year before. We need to be saving more water. We need to have cash for grass and other things, but it should be all over town, but it's not. And so I recommend that. But, people do need to be able to come and ask questions. We're not allowed in the staff meetings, right? This is our only opportunity to come and talk to the Basin Management Committee. So I'm sorry if we seem irritating with our questions, but we really have honest questions. We want to see what's done, see the best thing done for our town, because this is important to us. Some of us actually live here, and this is our water and our future. So thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more questions online.
Yeah, I would like to just do one clarification here. This is only when there's a need to have an outside attorney and the attorneys working for S&T or for the CSD or for S&T or the county are not able to come to a conclusion because of conflicts or something in that nature. So they are not serving as the overarching attorneys. They're only serving on an as needed basis. So I think that needs to be clarified. That's something that we talked about when we went through this. And Daniel, could you talk a little bit about that and the process that you went through to come up with this, please?
I can, Gerald Hilsky. Yeah, I was remiss. I mean, if you review the fiscal impact portion of the staff report, it describes this as needed approach to legal counsel services and the effort to keep costs down. Historically, the BMC has relied upon legal counsel from the individual BMC parties. However, we have found instances where the BMC legal counsel don't agree with each other. And so the BMC staff, and I would point out, this is not just for the BMC and the executive director. This is for the BMC as a whole, to ensure that we remain in compliance with the stipulated judgment. We don't find ourselves back in court with dealing with all the costs associated with that. So we agreed. This is an as needed. We will continue to try to work as cost effectively as possible, but we have identified a need for independent legal counsel to provide legal input to the BMC specifically, and not have to worry about them representing their individual party and within the legal advice that they're providing.
Thank you. Bruce, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Only that the item before us today is a result of discussions on multiple occasions previous, and I think the essence of those discussions were as well summarized by Dan just now. So I am happy to move approval of staff's recommendation.
I have a couple just
Yeah,
follow-up
go
comment.
ahead, Mark.
One of the things that was brought up in the comment was the conflict between Central Coast Blue and I didn't see any of that in the report. Is that a conflict of interest that we need to discuss or considered?
I don't see that it has any bearing.
I mean, I guess the question would be then is Dan receiving legal counsel on that project from Central Coast Blue? In addition to this one, I mean,
Again, I think, Mark, the question is, does that put us in any conflict for the decisions that the BMC has to make? And I don't see any situation in which that obtains. And this was a casual comment tossed out as far as I can see to try to confuse the issue here. If there was a specific conflict, it should be named. And I'd offer Dan the chance to, assert whether there is such a specific conflict, and RWG, the law firm to assert if they see a conflict. If they don't, I think we take that as a representation and we move forward.
and that's exactly why I asked if it was in the report. Was that brought up, and is it a concern? I certainly want Dan to respond to that. Regarding the expense, I did have a lot of reservation on this. The legal representation that we have. Yeah, there was some questions that Dan had in getting conflict from the legal representation. Being able to go and ask that clarifying question. I didn't intend that this was really going to be the overarching legal counsel for the BMC that Golden State was going to follow. So I think it's just better. It gives Dan a tool to do his job, is the way I envisioned it. We were going to take one small step at this. We authorized the minimal amount of money, $20,000, gave Dan some discretion. Also, I'm hoping that, or expecting that, we're going to see a registry of those expenses when they come back, if he does utilize this tool. I think that, what was mentioned, I mean, Brownstein, Hyatt, they're still going to be involved as a staff member. That is still a resource that Golden State has offered to be out there. I think the majority of the questions, it's been working very well to this time. We've just had some recent things come up. That's what I envision the legal counsel being for today. If it evolves into something further down the road, that's we'll discuss that and analyze it and figure out if that needs there. If we move into the JPA and such activities, I think that legal will be part of that equation. So for right now, I just really want to have clarity about Dan and the Central Coast Blue. If that was mentioned in here, do we need to talk further about it? And then will we be receiving a registry of expenses if he utilizes the service?
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I think again, you said what I said. I mean, this is only on an as needed basis. They're not our in-house legal counsel. So Daniel, would you like to comment on the question specifically about the blue? And
yes, Chair Ohilsky. Yeah, I mean, there is no mention of a potential conflict of interest with RWG and my role, because there is no understood conflict of interest in our relationship. Central Coast Blue is a project being led by Pismo Beach with partners in the South County. It's completely separate from anything occurring here in Los Osos. I don't have a role in Central Coast Blue currently at all. I think it's a comment purely made out of speculation and with no factual basis. And then, sorry, help me, Director Zimmer, the second part of your question. Oh, yes, we will track expenditures made towards this budget item, just like we do all other budget items, and make those expenditures available to the BMC as part of the invoice register that is presented with every month's agenda packet.
Okay.
thank you.
And I really wasn't inferring that there was a conflict. It's just something that I wasn't aware of that came to my attention. So thank you for that clarification.
Okay, we're gonna have we're gonna have a motion here.
Reiterate, I move staff's recommendation.
I'll second it.
Oh, thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can you call a roll call vote, Daniel, please?
Director Reinke,
That was a yes, yeah. The button again, there just.
Yes, yes for S&T.
Director Zimmer,
Yes.
Director Gibson,
Yes.
Chair Ohilsky.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, and then with that, we'll move on to item 9C, which is the Basin Management Committee 2022 budget reallocation recommendations. We're going to receive recommendations to modify the current budget allocations and contingencies to alternate tasks to leverage ability to utilize anticipated unused CC 2022 Basin Management Committee budget funds or provide alternative direction to staff. Okay, Daniel.
Thank you, Chair Ohilsky. So this is really a follow-up to the agenda item we had at the July 28th BMC meeting. At that meeting, we were looking at opportunities to leverage anticipated unused funds to improve the lower aquifer monitoring network, either through modification to existing wells within the Los Osos Basin and or the construction of a new monitoring well in the Los Osos Basin. Since that meeting, BMC staff and BMC party staff have had extensive discussions trying to identify a pathway where we could achieve the required modifications or construction of a new well and get all of those activities done before the end of calendar year 2022, before we lose access to the budgeted funds. And through those discussions, we've identified, through lengthy due diligence, that it is highly infeasible to construct a new monitoring well with the necessary permits and approvals required before the end of the year. And also highly unlikely or infeasible to be able to modify the wells LA 16 and 14 because of the necessary permits and approvals that would be required before the end of the year. And so while those continue to be promising projects and priority initiatives for the BMC, right, we're going to need to look towards future calendar years to fund those projects. And honestly, I think we have a promising opportunity to construct a new monitoring well in the Los Osos Basin in calendar year 2023 through partnership with the National Estuary Program, who has set aside grant funding to help cost share with the BMC for the construction of a new monitoring well, which if the BMC recalls, really was the highest priority identified by BMC party staff for improving our monitoring network. But more on that to come. That'll be a calendar year 2023 budget initiative discussion. So what we've brought forth today is a number of initiatives that the BMC staff and party staff believe are high priority projects that could be implemented this calendar year, leverage anticipated unused funds, and really improve the BMC's ability to monitor and manage the basin. And so I want to walk through those three recommended projects at this point. So the first one is a well modification project. It's modifications to the Farrell or LA 13 well. That well could be modified to become a dedicated Zone E lower aquifer monitoring well that could be a reliable data source to help inform the BMC about potential seawater intrusion occurring in Zone E at the Farrell location, which is in the general historical preferred pathway for seawater intrusion. And so the BMC staff recommends that as a project for moving forward this year. That well is owned by the LOCSD. The LOCSD has indicated that they can move quickly to get the necessary permits and approvals to do that work and get that work done in calendar year 2022. And that has approximately a price tag of $31,514. The next item is an updated agriculture and turf irrigation estimate. As the BMC knows, there's a lengthy discussion that occurs on an annual basis when we develop the annual report with respect to the methodology that's utilized to calculate the amount of ag water pumping that is occurring in the Los Osos Valley. And so what is being proposed here is a partnership with the California Irrigation and Research Center, who is leading the implementation of a new remote sensing technology that has significant opportunities to improve the BMC's ability to estimate ag demand, ag water use in the unmetered portions of the basin on a parcel by parcel basis. It's just frankly is a technology that hasn't historically been available to us and can get us some of the best available estimates that we can have for how much water is being used by the ag users in the Los Osos Basin. And so it's being recommended that the BMC approve a proposal from Cleath geologists and the ITRC to perform this work, develop a proposal for a proposed methodology for updating our ag demand estimates for the annual report, and also provide critical input information for the transient model. So meaning that these ag demand estimates can then be inputs into the model, improve the overall quality of the model itself. Finally, the BMC is recommending the BMC staff is recommending that the BMC staff approve the development of a Los Osos Basin well database. Currently, there is not a comprehensive database of all the wells within the basin. Numerous entities, the BMC, County Health Department, Department of Water Resources, all maintain their own individual data sets on well location, well depths, well uses, well screened intervals, the status of those wells. Are those wells active? Are they abandoned? Were they properly abandoned? Or are they potential contamination risks for the basin? And so this proposal would allow Cleath Harris geologists to compile information from all of those data sources into one consistently formatted database that would be GIS enabled, meaning it would include spatial attribute data, and create a very powerful tool set for, again, feeding into the transient groundwater model, calibrating that model, making decisions on how we can improve our monitoring network by potentially leveraging other existing wells within the basin, and then again, additionally identifying potentially improperly abandoned wells for further investigation to improve the quality within the basin. And so those are the three recommended budget reallocation initiatives the BMC staff is bringing to the BMC today. If you look at the table on the left, there's estimated to be approximately $94,000 in unused funds in calendar year 2022. The BMC, the total funding amount recommended is $84,000, so approximately $10,000 under the anticipated unused budget amount. And BMC staff really recommends that the BMC authorize, any or all of these initiatives as a way to continue our implementation of a BMC initiatives to improve monitoring and management of our basin. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Daniel. Do we have some questions or comments? Okay.
I'll save my comment till after public comment.
Okay, we'll go to public comment then, Julian.
If you'd like to make a comment online, please raise your hand or come up to the podium in person.
My name is Terry Simons. I'm back again at the risk of sounding like some sort of ultra conservative, right wing, anti-government person. I will say that whenever I hear satellite monitoring, and that's really what GIS is, I have to choose my words carefully. I want to say invade, but I won't say invade. To gather information on private property uses of wells and irrigation practices, I think borders on invasiveness of the private property rights of the people that have those wells. the data collection that you're proposing to have Cleith Harris do on your behalf, a lot of those documents are generally described as proprietary and are not for public access. You guys are in one sense the public, but in the other sense, you're a private entity. So this will be a good project for your new attorney to work on when you start getting sued by private property owners. But to take a more positive look at this, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to gather information from privately owned wells. And has anybody actually just gone out and asked the owners of these ag wells and some of these larger property wells if they are willing to give you that information without spending money on perhaps very sophisticated satellite models and algorithms to develop water use? Why don't you just go ask the people that are using the water? And if they say no, well, so be it. But I think this has historically been a very cooperative community. And I think that a lot of the farmers and stuff would be perfectly willing to tell you how much water they're using. And that could be documented by either monitoring the well meters, or you could just simply do it by monitoring PG&E demand and calculate how much water that generates. So before you spend a whole bunch of money on what may appear as the spy in the sky or the Orwellian overlook to trying to figure out what your neighbors are using for in their wells, why don't you just go ask them? Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Should I go now? Lindy Owen again. This is one of my subjects. I've always wondered why here we are 7 years along and we don't really know how much water the private wells use. California law protects everything underneath a property owner's property, and it's changing because California has got to change with the conditions that we're watching some of our areas go into. I think that I thought we were going to have some information on this as to how much it would cost. I support the well database. I think that's really important. We don't have that information. It's pretty embarrassing at 7 years that we still don't know what private wells are pumping what and who has what. But I would like to see that put together. And I'd like to see a list of what it would cost to put a private monitor, usage monitor, a quantity monitor on every private well, and what it would cost to have it read once a year, to try not to be so invasive. We already know that those wells can use anything that they want. As far as PG&E, they have solar panels on them now. We have no idea how much they're pumping. So it's really important data. There's no way for us to know what's being taken out of our basin by excluding what is considered, I think it's 50% of the water being taken out. I could be wrong on that. But I really support that we definitely, and I think the county should go ahead and pay for this. It's the county's area and they don't participate monetarily a whole lot anyway. And all taxpayers in the county are paying the bill that the county presents to us each month. So consider that that isn't a whole lot of money. It's 29,000. And if you wanted to put together the database, which is pretty much the county's responsibilities also, that's 24,000. So, and lastly, I would just like to mention the fact that the public comes to these meetings to learn. There is no other place to learn. We don't have open forums, or Mr. Gibson doesn't present anything to include us. So I really object to his idea that we take up too much time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindy. Is there any other public
There are no
comment?
more public comments.
Okay, thank you. Daniel, would you like to comment? And then I'll turn it over to Bruce to comment. Or Bruce, you want to go first? Daniel?
Yeah, I guess I would comment with respect to the use of satellite data being invasive. I mean, this is a technology that is being leveraged throughout the state and has been highly utilized in the Central and San Joaquin Valleys, some of the most controversial water areas within California and the Western United States. I'm not aware of any privacy issues associated with that. We've met with the ITRC. You know, they're very knowledgeable on this. There are multiple companies leveraging this type of technology. And I think it presents a real opportunity to improve the BMC's ability to better understand how much water is being pumped from the groundwater basin. You know, we're constantly criticized for not having meters. We don't have the authority to implement meters, but this would be a way to get us a long ways towards improving that data set and answering the questions that we have about non-metered use in the basin.
Daniel, can you answer the question about have people gone to these people in person and asked them for the ability to get the water consumption from them?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know that people have. You know, my history with the BMC it started in 2019, and so you know, the BMC's history in the basin extends much further back than that. I would add, though, that as part of this initiative, we would include outreach to the ag users in the Los Osos Basin. There is value in their partnership, even moving forward with this initiative in terms of being able to collect data and actually use and calibrate it against the data that's obtained from the satellite imagery. So I would say that this doesn't preclude collaboration with the agricultural users in the basin, and in reality, I think could support and enhance that.
Thank you. Okay, Bruce.
Well, I think members of the BMC understand that the effort we're mounting here is to try to get a check or a confirmation of a number that we have plugged into our basin modeling, which is, if I remember correctly, 800 acre feet a year being used in the agricultural areas. And this is, you know, public information. The remote sensing information is public information that can be used to try to cross-check that number. We have had questions throughout the course of the BMC as to whether that is, you know, whether that number is accurate. It is put in as an aggregate number because we have explicitly excluded from the adjudication, or we've offered them the chance, but none of the individual property owners on the east side of the basin has joined the adjudication for reasons that make sense, because it's time, expense, and a lot of other stuff that would be visited on them if they chose, and they can always choose to join the adjudication. So I think this is a fundamentally important step forward. I can tell you from experience elsewhere in the county that going and asking for private well information consumption is not going to get us anywhere near 100% voluntary compliance. And in fact, I would expect we wouldn't get 10% voluntary compliance on that. That's based on experience elsewhere. So without having nearly 100%, we would not actually gain the information we need. There is a provision for those wells, and all of them are in the coastal zone, that if they were drilled new after a certain date, they have to have a meter on them, and they have to provide for the opportunity to record that information, to be provided that information. To date, there are very few wells that fit that criterion, and again, no mechanism by which to record the information from those wells that we know have meters on them. So as I look at the presentation, we got, you know, 35, 36 pages of detailed technical explanation of what we're about here. I think all three of these are worthy projects to make use of the unspent budget, and I'm wholeheartedly in support of all three.
Thank you, Bruce. Excuse me, what I'm going to do here when we actually take votes on this, I'm going to vote on each one of the three separately in case somebody has different issues with it, because I have an issue with the agricultural one.
Yeah.
I quite frankly think they need to be metered, and that's the approach we need to take. And I know we've had that discussion with the county, but so I'm going to take these separately unless somebody has an objection to that.
No, I agree with that. Just a couple of comments on each one of them from my perspective is that, you know, the Farrell well, LA 13, support that. We talked about it at our last meeting. Glad to see that come back, and I think it's an effort we would support. Agricultural turf estimates. I don't know what benefit that really brings to us today. We have some work in progress from our Title 19 and the Madaus as far as water usage estimates. I just don't see a lot of change that's been out there from the previous work. Really didn't see what this new, and I understand we have some new technology that'll be used, but I just don't know, you know, diverting what was budgeted. We're not going to do that. Seems like a way just to check the box on, you know, spending our budget. I think it'll be a worthwhile effort once we have our modeling and, but right now just may not be the time for it. And then the Los Osos Basin well database, I think a lot of this information is out there. There was some reference that it's not, it's jumbled, it's mismatched. I know in one of our other systems, we did a well data analysis, and it was an easy grab from the county's public health database that gave us a pretty good understanding of the database and what exists out there. I think doing those kinds of efforts first before authorizing this expenditure makes sense. I think that a lot of this is in readily available. It's more of packaging the information so it's with the BMC, which I understand is part of the initiative, but I would like to do the legwork ahead of time. And just, Dan, as the executive director, if you could make that request and come back with that information of what is a simple request from the county as far as the database of existing wells, maybe further discussion. I don't know, you know, timing, we still have some time left in this year. I understood about the Farrell well that takes time with permitting and such. These other ones, I don't think that timing is quite as critical now. So that's my comments.
Thank you. Any other comment? Okay.
I would only point out on the turf measurement, that doesn't preclude eventually metering the wells as necessary. But as we've discussed before on a number of occasions, getting a necessary county ordinance funding and systems in place to actually meter and gather that data is a multi-year project. And so I think this is a modest expenditure in the short term that doesn't cut off that future, that gives us another check on one of the parameters of our modeling that should, I think it's an easy spend to justify, and we can continue the conversation about how we move to metering wells.
Well, I'm going to agree with Mark on this one. I think that it's a little premature, and I think that we just need to work our way through it. And I think we just, you know, we have time in our budget to do this at a later date, but I think right now, just to say we're going to spend the money that we have budgeted, I'd rather just hold off on it. I agree with Mark on that. Excuse me.
Marshall, if you would let me, there were some questions included in there I'd like to respond to before we go to a vote. Would you permit me?
Yeah, go ahead, Daniel. And I have to, Mr. Gibson has to leave at 3:40, so we have to get this concluded by then.
Understood. Yeah, so I would characterize this, you know, there's a question about how is this different than the Madaus report. The Madaus report is purely looking at water usage within, you know, residential urban areas, purveyor served areas within the basin. The ITRC exercise would be looking at areas outside of the purveyor service areas ag users that are not going to be included in the Medal's report. So unfortunately, that report really isn't going to help inform our estimates of unmetered water use, as I understand it. The well database information is a compilation exercise. You know, yeah, we wouldn't be asking Clearterrace geologists to generate data. It would just be, they would be reaching out to the parties that maintain the existing data, just as a point of clarification. And then finally, just with respect to the timing, you know, this really is, as I see it, is our opportunity to leverage these funds. If we come back at a meeting in October, I don't, you know, the estimates to do the ITRC work is already 3 months. We're already, you know, compressing that if we were to authorize today. I don't know exactly the well database, but my experience creating a well database for the Northern Cities management areas is that was a multi-month endeavor. And so I just want to make the BMC aware that this really is our opportunity to move forward with these initiatives. Now, we don't have to. We are not bound by the stipulated judgment to move these initiatives forwards. But if we are going to, in the near term, this would be that opportunity. I would also add that, you know, what we're talking about for next year is inclusion of a new monitoring well as part of the calendar year 2023 budget. I think there's strong support for that. I'm a huge supporter of us doing that. However, that is likely going to utilize all or most, if not all, of the sort of discretionary budget available to the BMC. And so funding for these other types of initiatives, likely, if the BMC proceeds down that path, would not be available until calendar year 2024.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move through these items one at a time. Excuse me, I just lost my.
Yeah, just you want to take a motion on the monitoring well modification and
On the Farrell
just-
Street is the first.
you just straw voted or take a motion. I'll make a motion. We approve the, was it LA 13 modifications
Thank you.
per staff's recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay, so we'll just take the straw vote on that. Is everybody in favor of that one?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and so we have unanimous approval or unanimous agreement on that one. So then the second one is the agricultural.
I'll make a motion to approve the ITRC expenditure.
Okay. Anybody? So if we don't need a second, because we're just doing a straw vote here.
Well, if we don't get a second, then that's.
It
pretty
doesn't
much
matter, yeah,
pretty
I
much an
know.
indicator, and we know where that's going already, so.
So nobody's seconding that one. Okay. So that one, straw vote will show that that one has one
No.
support.
One support.
And then the last one is the Los Osos Basin Well Database.
I'll make that motion. As proposed, and it is a compilation. I don't see it duplicating anything, so.
I
Happy
can, I would support this, but I have a question for Daniel before. I know we're running out of time, but Daniel, is this going to be a fixed fee of 24,000 or is that just going to be the budgetary amount?
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed amount, because Clearterrace is going to do the work, but what is that number? Is that a fixed fee or not to exceed?
I mean, that would be similar to almost all the BMC's contracts, is the time and materials not to exceed amount. And so the expectation would be that work would be completed within that budget. If there were extraordinary circumstances that warranted any increase in the fee beyond that, then the executive director would bring those increases to the BMC for their consideration.
Okay, thank you.
I have a follow-on to that question. So this well monitoring database, is it going to be a living thing that is maintained internally by BMC or another party?
I would anticipate, like a lot of the BMC's current data sets, they would be maintained by the BMC's hydrogeologist. So Cleith Harris geologist, would develop this database and then would update it and maintain as long as the BMC retain them as its hydrogeologist. Should the BMC choose to transfer the contract, then this database and all of the materials would then transfer to a new consulting hydrogeologist to maintain.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and second it, Bruce.
Okay.
Because I think it's important. I mean, we're not just looking at one user here, or pardon me, we're looking at right here, we have the 4, and then, so we've got to get these things compiled somehow.
And it's a fundamental piece of information for our ongoing management
Right.
efforts. So,
Well, the sustainability calculations and everything,
Yes.
these numbers to get this correlated or compiled is important.
yes.
Okay, so we'll take the straw vote. Start with,
yes, for S&T.
yes.
No,
Okay, so 3-1. So let's go ahead and then actually, so formally, I think what the motion will be is then we approve the Farrell Street. We do not approve the ag and turf irrigation estimate, and we approve the basin well databases.
So moved.
I'll second. Okay, so Daniel, you want to take a vote on this, please?
Yes, Chair Ohilski, let me do that. Director Reinke,
Yes,
Director Gibson,
Yes.
Director Zimmer,
no,
Chair Ohilski.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 3-1.
Okay, thank you. So with that, then we'll move on to the last item, which is adjournment. So unless anybody has any further items on the committee here, we will be adjourned until our meeting in October. Thank everybody for their participation and attendance. And that's it.
nice to meet you.